in 42 when I went in. By the birthday, I'd been 20 years old, but I went in on March 3rd, 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. And when I went down to Des Moines to enlist, they said, well, we can't guarantee you what you're going to get by enlisting, but usually if you enlist, you get what you want. And I said, I want to be a mechanic in the Air Force. And after about 10 days at Fort Des Moines, why, they finally swore me in and sent me on a train and got in a truck, and I was in the Corps of Engineers. And I said, I'm not supposed to be in the Corps of Engineers. Well, this is the best outfit in the Army. You know, so I was supposed to be in the Air Force, Air Corps at that time. But I ended up there, and I took basic training at Fort Leonard Wood. And while I was there, well, I had a chance to go to headquarters company after I got through to be a clerk typist in headquarters company. And while I was working there, next door was the Air Force building, and I kept asking them what that was. You go over there and take a test, and you pass, you get to be a pilot. So that's what I did. And the guy says, well, you passed. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, they keep you here until they need you, and then you'll go into the Air Force and learn how to fly. And so I went back to the office where I was working, and this captain says, Walter, what have you been doing? And I said, I go over there and take a test, and you pass it, you get to be a pilot. Well, he said, you didn't ask me if you could go over there. And I said, well, it was noon. I thought I could do what I wanted on my noon hour. Well, you should have asked me. I said, well, it's too late. They said that I'd pass, and you got to keep me here. You can't ship me anyplace until they get ready to take me. So I worked for him then until they called me up to go to the Air Force. Then primary training I took at Thunderbird Field in Arizona, which was, I think that the field was formed by maybe something to do with the movie industry. It was a real, kind of like a flying club before the Army took it over. And there I got 60 hours in a PT-17 and at the open cockpit. And I had never flown, and when the first mission, our first time up, I didn't know what, but it didn't seem to me like it amounted that much. But you did a lot of maneuvers in that airplane. It was a biplane, you know, and it was the only plane we ever done a lot of spins and stuff in. But, and you were supposed to solo by 12 or 14 hours. And I had 12 hours and I hadn't soloed. So they gave me to an insurance salesman. All these instructors were civilian pilots. And this man was B.B. Moore out of Arizona. And he says, Walter, what's your problem? I said, well, I do pretty good one day, and my instructor says, well, if you do this good tomorrow, I'll give you the airplane. But I says, then he tells me how much the airplane costs. He never says anything about my life. It's always how much the airplane costs. And I said, he never lets me solo. He said, well, he said, don't worry about it. He said, if you have trouble finding the ground, he said, I'll build a platform out there, and you just drive past and step off on the platform. So we flew a couple of days, and he did most of the flying and just talk continually. And this one day, this big field, and he said, taxi over to the marker that showed which way you took off. And I taxied over there, and he gets out, and he gets over, and he gets down on the ground and lays in the shade. And I'm sitting there, the airplanes are running, and pretty soon he looks up and he comes over and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm waiting for you. Oh, he said, I forgot to tell you. He said, go shoot 3 landings and come back and get me. I'm going to take a nap. So I shot 3 landings and taxi's back over, and he comes stretching like he'd been asleep. He said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "Wasn't you watching me?" "Oh, no," he said, "I knew you could do it."
How'd that feel?
Just, I mean, to have confidence that, that was my instructor was a nice man, but all he ever worried about was what that airplane cost. That's every day. This cost, I don't know how much, but a big figure for us in those days. And this B.B. Moore, I stopped after the war and thanked him